There are several Muppets out there who took quite a while to evolve into the versions of themselves we know today. Kermit famously didn't start off as a frog, Miss Piggy started out as a background character, occasionally even having different Muppeteers perform her, and Fozzie Bear used to sound like this.
All right, everybody, reach for the floor.
But for every character out there that took a while to evolve, there's an equal number of Muppets that started weird and have remained weird. New Zealand was throwing boomerang fish since his first appearance. Beaker said meep 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 since his first appearance. And the Swedish Chef has been absolutely insane since he first debuted. Speaking in a language the subtitles lovingly refer to as mock Swedish, doing his best to make food and only occasionally hitting it with a shotgun, the Swedish Chef has, for years, been one of the most popular, most iconic Muppet characters out there, and you'd be surprised to learn that he's been just as crazy since his first appearance. The Swedish Chef is, in my opinion, a lightning-in-a-bottle character, and that's why his history is so interesting to me. From the very start, all of the elements of the modern Swedish Chef are right there. They worked then, and they still work now. He's a combination of crazy and wild elements that work so perfectly with each other, creating, inarguably, one of the most iconic and consistently funny characters in the Muppets cast. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Muppet Deep Dive. It's been quite a while, hasn't it? I'm your host Ty, as always, and I'm so happy to be back, giving you guys the history of another iconic Muppet character. Today, we're going to be going through the full history of the Swedish Chef, from his debut in the 70s to right now in 2025. There's a lot of history to cover, and I'm very excited, so let's get started. After the success of Sam and Friends in 1955, Jim Henson would find himself frequently doing commercials and performing at shows and events. In 1961, he performed at the USDA Food Festival in Hamburg, Germany, and did a sketch starring a chef, which was portrayed by Omar, a character from Sam and Friends. For this sketch, Jim Henson and writer Jerry Jewell put together a bunch of random gibberish for Omar to say that sounded vaguely German. The concept of a bumbling chef putting together crazy meals in ridiculous ways while speaking complete gibberish clearly stuck with Henson for quite a while. In his introduction to The Muppet Show that released in 1999, Jim's son, Brian Henson, explained another piece of the puzzle for the Swedish Chef's origin. He explained that when he was a child, Jim Henson used to have a cassette tape that he'd play in the car called, wait for it, How to Speak Mock Swedish. Jim Henson, always a lover of gadgets and weird, funny things, would constantly play this tape in the car with his son, and then try to emulate the random gibberish he was being taught. According to Brian Henson, he would do this mainly while making food, with it sounding and looking absolutely ridiculous.
When I was a kid, my father was so into gadgets, cars especially, and he had this tape that he used to play, which was How to Speak Mock Swedish. And he used to drive to work, and I used to ride with him a lot, and he'd drive to work trying to make a chicken sandwich in mock Swedish, or make a turkey casserole in mock Swedish. It was the most ridiculous thing you'd ever seen.
Now, if you're like me, when you heard the How to Speak Mock Swedish tape, you probably thought there's no way this was an actual real thing, right? Well, here's the thing. How to Speak Mock Swedish was made by a man named Marshall Brickman, who gave the tape to Jim Henson to help him practice a character he was working on. You see, Marshall Brickman was a TV writer who was helping Jim Henson write a pilot for a certain series that went on to be called The Muppet Show. Clearly, the concept of a chef that does crazy cooking while speaking a fake parody language was something that stuck with Jim Henson and something that he really wanted to do, and in 1975, when the Muppet Show pilot, The Muppet Show Sex and Violence, yes, that's its real name, aired, the Swedish Chef was right there as one of the sketches. From the jump, you could see that the Swedish Chef's design is pretty much the same as the one we know today, with just a couple of updates over the years. His iconic eyebrows in the place of eyes, his big nose and mustache, blue plaid shirt with an apron, chef hat, and of course, his hands. While it's sometimes rather hard to spot, it's become pretty well-known trivia over the years that the Swedish chef's hands are actual, real hands. This was done so that he could handle the real food better. The puppet simply had holes in his sleeves where a Muppeteer could fit their hands through. Back in the Muppet Show days, Jim Henson would perform the voice and face of the Swedish chef, while Frank Oz would typically handle the hands. So those hands are usually gonna be Frank Oz's actual real hands in there. For promotional photo shoots, the Swedish chef's hands are usually swapped out with a pair of actual puppet hands to make him look a bit more consistent. And on very rare occasion, for a couple scenes over the years where the Swedish chef hasn't been handling food, they have given him regular puppet gloves, operating him like a regular live hand Muppet, but this typically isn't done. You're usually going to see those real hands. Not only has the Swedish chef's appearance stayed consistent all these years, so too has the mock Swedish language. It's a mix of complete gibberish and actual English words, both of which are constantly given exaggerated Swedish vowel sounds.
Lørdags efter lørdags der søls, cause folken here has baked the cheese, and their latest first made.
The format of his sketch is also basically the exact same. In a skit that's about 1 minute and 15 seconds long, the Swedish chef instructs us on how to make a certain dish. Specifically, today, it's a submarine sandwich, which he quickly loads with, yes, some food, but also some completely random items, including a record and a rubber chicken. Eventually, the sandwich flies away on its lettuce wings. This concept of cooking a food in a crazy way and then something ridiculous happening, usually involving the chef being harmed by the food or the food somehow removing itself from the sketch, became the typical formula for all Swedish chef sketches going forwards. Sometimes the punchline is directly linked to the food being made, other times it's linked to how the chef made it. And while all of these things have stayed consistent in the Swedish chef sketch formula over the years, there are a few changes between the pilot version and the final version we would see in the Muppet Show proper. He has an opening title card on screen instead of his iconic theme song, he's placed in a slightly different kitchen set, and, for some insane reason, he has Chinese subtitles at the bottom of the screen.
It's very her, the pruning bird. The pruning bird is me, Swedish burning bird. It's working more than pretty pretty.
No, this is not footage from a foreign dub of the Muppet Show pilot. This is the real, actual English language version, and the Swedish chef has Chinese subtitles. I have absolutely no clue why this was done, but it seems to just be another way to make the character even more crazy and random and confusing. While this is a pretty funny concept, it was dropped for the final version of the Muppet Show, which I think is the right choice for sure. After the Muppet Show was picked up, the Swedish chef immediately became a recurring sketch, with his first cooking escapade appearing in Season 1, Episode 2. In this sketch, he makes meatballs, which eventually start to bounce, and so he starts playing tennis with them. Even Statler and Waldorf join in.
15 love.
For the final version of the show, the Swedish chef was given a new kitchen set, and now every sketch started with his theme song, which always ends with the Swedish chef singing "Bork, Bork, Bork" and throwing away whatever utensils he was holding. Following this sketch, the Swedish chef went on to appear in over 30 segments across the 5 seasons of The Muppet Show. Many of them including now iconic jokes and gags that would become staples of the character and how he acted. For example, perhaps one of the most well-known Swedish chef sketches comes from Season 1, Episode 14, when he throws muffins into the air, pulls out a rifle, and shoots them, creating donuts.
Donut.
The Swedish chef's usage of guns or other projectile weapons as cooking appliances is a pretty common joke with the character that we still see to this day, and while he did first do this in the pilot, shooting down the flying away submarine sandwich, I think this is easily the most famous example of the Swedish chef pulling out a gun. That could have been phrased better. One of my personal favorites comes from Season 1, Episode 20, when the Swedish chef is trying to put icing on a cake, only for it to come alive and start screaming in Japanese. But the sketch gets even funnier when the Swedish chef pulls out a dictionary in an attempt to understand the Japanese cake, and gives up, instead bringing out a baseball bat. The Japanese cake has always stood out to me as one of the funniest food characters the Swedish chef has interacted with, and I'm certainly not the only one who remembered it fondly. In the early 2000s, the Palisades Muppet action figure line actually made the Japanese cake as an accessory in a Swedish chef playset. My all-time favorite Swedish chef segment comes from Season 2, Episode 9, where the Swedish chef tries to make lobster thermidor, putting a lobster in a pot of boiling water, only to be interrupted by a Mexican lobster gang wielding guns that start shooting at him and make a daring rescue of the lobster in the pot. These characters, officially referred to as the Lobster Banditos, actually also got an action figure. Season 2, Episode 17 is a rare case of the Swedish chef interacting with the plot of an episode. In this episode, a live cow has been let loose in the Muppet Theater. Yes, an actual, real cow. And at one point it goes missing, only for Scooter to tell Kermit that the Swedish chef is using it as part of his act. We cut to the Swedish chef, who's painted all of the different cuts of the cow onto its side. Here, instead of getting a full Swedish chef sketch with an introduction and theme song and everything, we simply have Kermit walk onto the stage and cut off a sketch that's already underway. The Swedish chef having the cow is simply a punchline to the scene we saw before, where Kermit and Scooter were trying to figure out where the cow went. When pigs take over the Muppet Theater in Season 2, Episode 24, the Swedish chef is replaced by the Swedish pig. He's puppeteered by Frank Oz, fitting as Oz had been portraying the Swedish chef's hands this whole time. And his mock language is, very cleverly, a series of grunts and oinks and other pig sounds, with the exaggerated Swedish syllable sounds added in. In true Swedish chef fashion, he makes popcorn by shooting it. The Swedish chef's kitchen set is pretty inconsistent throughout the first 2 seasons. It looks like we're always seeing the same set, but sometimes different parts of it. In some sketches, like the lobster one, you can see a window behind him, but in most you can't. Sometimes there's one shelf behind him, sometimes 2. Clearly they were shooting the same set at different angles from episode to episode. In the Swedish chef's second sketch in Season 3, specifically in Season 3, Episode 9, he was given a new set. Notably, this one has blue wallpaper in the background. And, much like the previous set, it was shot from several different angles across the remaining seasons of the show. Also in Season 3, the Swedish chef began to make a few more off-stage appearances, working in the canteen, a new cafeteria area introduced to the Muppet Show in this season. The Swedish chef's sketch in Season 3, Episode 9 actually starts with Scooter telling Chef, who's working in the canteen, that it's time for him to go on stage. In this sketch, the Swedish chef tries to make coffee, but he still hears the liquid moving even after he shuts off the coffee pot. He realizes where the sound is coming from, taking off his hat to reveal that there's a coffee pot stuck in his head. This one always weirded me out as a kid. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the cast of Veterinarians Hospital shows up to diagnose the Swedish chef with ingrown coffee pot.
Oh, wow, Dr. Bob, what's wrong with this man?
Oh, I think he has an advanced case of ingrown coffee pot.
I love seeing these very rare cases where the Muppet Show sketches cross over. In Season 3, Episode 11, we have one of, if not the most, iconic Swedish chef sketches where he prepares chicken in a basket by throwing a chicken through a basketball hoop.
That's 2 points.
This is easily one of the most well-known Swedish chef sketches out there, and in case you were wondering, yes, it does have an action figure. Well, actually, it was supposed to, but it got cancelled. Oh well. There's also a really funny blooper of this sketch out there. I'll have to see if I can find it. It's really good.
Somebody get a ladder! Break!
Season 3, Episode 16 is one of very few times where the Swedish chef is joined by somebody else. Specifically, that episode's guest star, Danny Kaye, who is apparently the Swedish chef's uncle. The two play off of each other pretty well, preparing an international turkey dish, and the Swedish chef's uncle reveals the Swedish chef's real name.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's his name. But we call him Tom.
The camping-themed Season 4, Episode 1 has the Swedish chef outside preparing squirrel stew, only for him to be harassed by the woodland animals and chased by a bear that picked up his cleaver. Season 4, Episode 4 is another time where the plotline of an episode interrupts the Swedish chef. This time around, he's cooking hot dogs, which is a pretty inconvenient meal to make considering Miss Piggy's dog Fufu has gone missing. She asks the Swedish chef if he's seen her dog. The Swedish chef gets confused, thinking that she's talking about the hot dogs, and says that they're in the pot. Miss Piggy reacts accordingly. Season 4, Episode 12 is a very rare case of the Swedish chef appearing in a sketch outside of his own. He actually has a full musical number here, singing Yes, We Have No Bananas with a group of Muppet food. The Swedish chef was used very rarely in sketches outside of his own. In fact, you barely even saw him backstage, save for a few exceptions like in the canteen and a couple other appearances. But everything he did backstage was always related to his act, or to food, or to the fact that he was a chef. He never really went beyond just that, which is perfectly fine because he really is, at the end of the day, primarily a gag character whose jokes come from those elements. For some reason, Season 5, Episode 12 has Jerry Nelson's announcer voice say what the Swedish chef is going to make while he's singing his intro music.
Today, the Swedish chef will prepare spring chicken.
I don't know why this was done here. The Swedish chef always introduces his dishes at the start of the segment. Why they had the regular announcer for other sketches like Pigs in Space and Veterinarian's Hospital do it here, I'm not sure. As you'd probably expect from spring chicken, the chickens bounce out of the pot and start to spring around everywhere, even continuing this backstage. I love how many chickens there are here. It's insanely chaotic and really funny, but I especially love Waldorf's reaction to this.
I thought that was the dumbest Swedish chef spot they've ever done. What do you think? When will you ever learn? You're no spring chicken anymore.
In Season 5, Episode 20, the Swedish chef would be given another musical number, this time singing Danny Boy alongside Beaker and Animal. These three are the most significant Muppet characters with an abnormal way of speaking, so pairing them up and trying to have them sing a song as dramatic and emotional as Danny Boy leads to hilarious results. These three have continued to be paired up for the occasional comedic music number to this day. The Swedish chef's final sketch on The Muppet Show would come in Season 5, Episode 23, the penultimate episode of the entire series. In this sketch, Chef tries to open up a champagne bottle, only for it to end up launching him into the sky. We then cut to a Muppet news flash, where the newsman is reporting on an unidentified flying object hovering above the studio, only for that to be, of course, the Swedish Chef.
When last seen, it was directly over the Muppet newsroom.
And that concludes the Swedish Chef's role on The Muppet Show. As you can see, they pretty much nailed the Swedish Chef sketch from the very start, placing him in a bunch of really funny situations in terms of what food he was making and how he made it. While the Swedish Chef doesn't really interact with other characters often, he absolutely shines on his own when he's making food. But now it's time to move on from The Muppet Show and take a look at some of the Swedish Chef's other appearances. The Muppet movie released in 1979 while The Muppet Show was still airing on TV, and the Swedish Chef doesn't have a very large role in it. Despite the film being an origin story of how all the significant Muppet characters met, we don't see how they met the Swedish Chef here. He's also not in the audience of Muppets that are screening the movie, but this is for a reason, because the Swedish Chef is actually the one in the back running the projector. We get to see him very briefly when the film stops working 2/3 of the way through, absolutely covered in film, trying to figure out what to do. In the second film, The Great Muppet Caper, the Swedish Chef has quite a bit more screen time, but still isn't really a significant character. He, like a large number of the Muppets in this film, are just residents of the Happiness Hotel that help out throughout. Remember how I said the Muppet movie doesn't show how the Muppets met the Swedish Chef? Well, the next film, The Muppets Take Manhattan, actually does. After the Muppets break up, we see that Scooter has gotten a job working as an usher at a movie theater, where the Swedish Chef also works.
Yeah, their poppin' corn is 3D. Ah, the corn is popping in their face and 3D.
Yeah, but Chef, that's not how 3D works. Oh, never mind.
This scene not only exists as an origin point for the Swedish Chef, but also for New Zealand, who comes into the theater and starts throwing his fish at the screen. I always really appreciated how this scene took the time to introduce two characters that the Muppet movie didn't. The Swedish Chef's roles in these early movies may be small, but you could tell they still really enjoyed writing gags for him. And they understood that he was a pretty significant and pretty funny character. I mean, the Muppet movie literally grinds to a halt, and then we see the Swedish Chef. His role in Muppets Take Manhattan, meanwhile, is kind of thrown in as a surprise cameo. I think it's pretty interesting to note, though, that because of these small roles, the Swedish Chef still isn't really interacting with the rest of the Muppet cast all that much. The Swedish Chef continued to play a supporting role in the Muppets cast all throughout the 80s, appearing in nearly every major Muppet production. One of my all-time favorite Swedish Chef appearances comes from this decade, specifically in 1981's The Muppets Go to the Movies. This TV special stars the Muppets parodying famous movies and movie genres, and the Swedish Chef is, fittingly, the star of the foreign film segment. Sam the Eagle comes on stage to announce the next film they're showing, a film from Ingmar Bergman, a real-life famed Swedish director. Unfortunately, Floyd tells Sam that they didn't get a movie from Ingmar Bergman, they got one from his brother, Gummo Bergman.
Gummo Bergman.
Oh, good, you've heard of him.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, well, here's the script.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Go away.
The film is titled Silent Strawberries, and I'm sorry, but isn't that such a perfect art film parody name? Can't you just see somebody making an art film with that name? Anyway, Sam narrates the film live, translating it into English from its original language, Swedish, or rather mock Swedish, as this film stars the Swedish Chef. The film starts in a very introspective way. It's deep and poetic as the Swedish Chef wanders through a garden he used to visit in childhood, before being confronted by the Angel of Death, which is Beaker.
Suddenly, a serious figure appeared. He says, I am the Angel of Death.
Panicked, the Swedish Chef tells the Angel of Death that he's not ready to die. So the Angel of Death gives him a rubber chicken instead, and the Swedish Chef decides to join a traveling show hosted by Kermit, who is also speaking mock Swedish.
Hey ho, Olaf the Frog here, with another great show for you. This is not right!
Even a mock Swedish-speaking Fozzie is there, and I'm sorry, this is so funny, I love it so much. Do you get why I had to include this in the video?
Ah! Druska, druska, druska! Waka, waka, waka.
Another notable Swedish Chef appearance from the 80s is A Muppets Family Christmas from 1987. This is my all-time favorite Muppet special, featuring the Muppets and Sesame Street characters and Fraggle Rock characters all coming together to celebrate the holidays. In this special, we see the Swedish Chef prepare a Christmas turkey, only to be interrupted by Big Bird, and the two have some really fun interactions.
Oh, Unger's
Gee, nice kitchen. Hey, are you gonna have cranberry sauce and mashed potatoes?
Ja, and spearing and burn.
Boy.
1 year later, in 1988, the Swedish Chef was given his very own breakfast cereal called Crunchy Stars. It was discontinued only a year later in 1989, but it's still pretty notable. It goes to show you just how popular the Swedish Chef is. If you want to learn more about Crunchy Stars, I actually did an entire video breaking down the history of it. It was one of the first ever videos posted to this channel, but I'll leave a link to it up in the card there. The Swedish Chef had a few different sketches to himself in 1989's The Jim Henson Hour, being accompanied by a new chef character named Jock Roach. And a year later, we saw the Swedish Chef in The Muppets at Walt Disney World and Muppet Vision 3D, where the Swedish Chef returns to projecting film for the Muppets, just like in the Muppet movie. If you look closely at the back of the theater, you can see that there's actually a Swedish Chef animatronic, who's especially notable at the end of the show when the projector explodes and he retaliates by bringing out a giant cannon. A lot of people miss that they actually built a Swedish Chef for the show. One of the things that makes Muppet Vision really fun, one of the things I'm going to miss from it the most when it closes next month. If you want to learn more about Muppet Vision, its history, and its legacy, I have a big Disney World video coming to the channel very soon, which is actually where this footage is coming from. Unfortunately, the Muppets at Walt Disney World and Muppet Vision 3D were the final two times that Jim Henson portrayed the Swedish Chef before his passing in May of 1990. Like many of Henson's characters, the Swedish Chef wasn't used much following his passing, appearing in only one scene in both Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet's Treasure Island. The Swedish Chef only appeared in the first episode of Muppets Tonight very briefly, and never showed up again for the rest of the series. In The Muppets Christmas Carol, the Swedish Chef was portrayed by David Rudman, but his Muppeteer switched to Bill Beretta starting with Muppet Treasure Island, who continues to portray him to this day. In 1999, the Swedish Chef guest starred on several episodes of a children's cooking and craft show called Donna's Day, which was made alongside the Jim Henson Company, hence why the Swedish Chef appeared, and I believe Kermit also appeared here too a bit. The Swedish Chef helped out host Donna Eriksson with crafts and recipes for families in what was easily Beretta's biggest role as the Swedish Chef since he had taken up the character, at least in terms of screen time and prominence. This is super obscure nowadays. Throughout the Muppet movies and specials of the late 90s and early 2000s, the Swedish Chef continued to make small speaking roles, basically what you'd expect from his movie roles at this point. He appears for a couple of seconds, says a couple of lines, and then the plot continues. This was the approach used for the character in Muppets from Space, It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie, The Muppets Wizard of Oz, and Muppets Letters to Santa. In 2007, the Swedish Chef began to wear a wedding ring. This was actually unintentional. Remember, the Swedish Chef has real human hands, and Steve Whitmire, who was performing the chef's hands at the time, simply forgot to take the ring off. But it stuck, and the Swedish Chef continues to wear a wedding ring to this day, with the 2015 ABC Muppet Show even referencing his wife.
Oh, Chef, you've been married for such a long time. If your wife left you, do you think you could live without her?
The The ring has continued to be a part of the Swedish Chef's design to this day, even after Steve Whitmire stopped performing with the Muppets. In 2008, the Muppets would begin to release new sketches online, and the Swedish Chef would appear in quite a few of these. This is when the Swedish Chef, Beaker, and Animal singing together became a much more common thing, as we saw it in 3 different YouTube videos. Stars and Stripes Forever, Habanera, and Ringing of the Bells all featured the 3 of them singing together, and keep that last one in mind, their Carol of the Bells cover will come back later. There was also a video where the Swedish Chef cooked pumpkins for Halloween, and another one called Popcorn, where the Swedish Chef makes popcorn and plays with the appliances in his kitchen, making a song as he waits for it to finish. You've probably seen this on account of it having over 70 million views and being the 2nd most viewed video on the entire Muppet YouTube channel, a testament to how popular the Swedish Chef has continued to be. In 2010, the Muppets had their very own online cooking show, The Muppets Kitchen with Cat Cora, which starred Cat Cora and... who's this guy? Chef Angelo? Who's that? Where's the Swedish Chef? Okay, yeah, so despite the Muppets having an entire cooking show, and a pretty funny one at that, the Swedish Chef never appeared in it. Instead, we had this poser, this guy. I bet he doesn't even speak fake Swedish. Yeah, he speaks English. Yeah, I don't know why the Swedish Chef wasn't here. Bill Barretto was here. He portrayed Pepe. And I don't know why the Swedish Chef wasn't in this. Moving on. 2011's Muppet movie, The Muppets, was easily the Swedish Chef's biggest role in a film to date. After the Muppets have broken up, Kermit keeps several pictures of them in a hallway in his house. In a really sweet song called Pictures in My Head, Kermit reflects on their time together and questions if the Muppets can reunite. One of the Muppets he keeps a picture of is the Swedish Chef, who has a few jokes throughout the song and also joins in for a few lines. Unfortunately, when the Muppets get back together, we don't actually see how they recruit the Swedish Chef, which I think is really a missed opportunity. It would have been so funny to reveal that he became some sort of prestigious 5-star restaurant chef, or maybe he has like a reality cooking show or something. But once the Swedish Chef is back with the gang, he appears all throughout the rest of the film. Unlike most of the previous Muppet movies, the Swedish Chef has multiple jokes, gags, and lines all throughout, instead of just 1 or 2 key moments. He's part of the crew that kidnaps Jack Black, he sings a line in the final song, but easily my favorite joke of the Swedish Chef is when the Muppets first return to the theater, and the Swedish Chef opens his old fridge. He's greeted by the Muppet food, which has been rotting away in the fridge the whole time, and they're all very happy to see him. Instead of greeting them back, the Swedish Chef says, "Say hello to my little friend," pulls out a flamethrower, and burns them all. It's great. In 2012, to promote the DVD release of The Muppets, the Swedish Chef appeared in an ad for Bounty paper towels, where he made an absolute mess catering for a party Kermit was throwing. In 2013, the Swedish Chef would appear in a few scenes of Lady Gaga and the Muppets Holiday Spectacular, performing 2 more Christmas songs alongside Beaker and Animal, Deck the Halls and Jingle Bells. He also had a few other jokes in other parts of the show, and if you want to know more, I also have a full dedicated video on this special. Only a week after this special aired, the Swedish Chef starred in a new online video called Food Fight. No, not that food fight, anything but that food fight. This video, like many of the Muppets' appearances at this time, was made to promote Muppets Most Wanted, which would release in early 2014. This video in particular was billed as a Muppisode, and featured the Swedish Chef having a cook-off against Gordon Ramsay. There are 2 different versions of this video, the 4-minute original cut and the 6-minute extended cut. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to focus on the extended cut since there's more content, but just know both versions of this video are up there on YouTube. The sketch starts with the Muppets waiting in line for the bathroom, only to be told by Austin and Alley Boy that this isn't the line for the bathroom, this is the line for a food truck. They prepare to leave, rounding up everyone except the Swedish Chef, who has started his own food stand called Bork Bork Fork. Kermit says the Swedish Chef needs to pack up. The Muppets need to leave, and for all he knows, the Swedish Chef may have taken someone else's spot. Of course, he did take someone else's spot, and that someone else is Gordon Ramsay, who drives up in his own food truck. Pops appears, suggesting the only way to settle this is with a food truck fight.
That's right, stranger. Food truck.
Swedish Chef and Gordon Ramsay both pick their cooking partners, with Swedish Chef picking Beaker and Gordon Ramsay begrudgingly picking Sweetums. Then WWE announcer Michael Buffer appears to announce the competitors.
And his opponent in this corner, from Sweden, we think the Lutefisk legend, Chef Swedish Chef. That's two chefs. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, for some reason, the extended version of this sketch was a cross-promotion with the WWE. This guy appears, a wrestler showed up earlier, I don't know why. We see the two teams of chefs duking it out, with Gordon Ramsay yelling at Sweetums just as much as you would expect, minus the profanity, of course. The Swedish Chef ends up winning on a technicality, that technicality being that they found a bunch of Sweetums' hair in Gordon Ramsay's dish. Gordon and the Swedish Chef say their goodbyes, and the sketch ends. I gotta say, this is pretty funny, but it's really lacking in Swedish Chef and Gordon Ramsay interactions. Most of it is him bickering with Sweetums, and I would have loved to see him and Swedish Chef interact more directly. Still, Swedish Chef versus Gordon Ramsay was something I knew I had to bring up. The only other Muppet ever made was just a re-release of the pre-existing Carol of the Bells video. See, I told you it would come up again. For some reason, 2013 was a pretty big year for Beaker, Animal, and Swedish Chef singing Christmas songs. In Muppets Most Wanted, the Swedish Chef's role is basically the same as it was in 2011's The Muppets. He appears all throughout the film in a variety of different jokes instead of just one like in past films. In We're Doing a Sequel, he pitches an existential foreign art film to Kermit, and we see him in black and white sitting across from the Grim Reaper. Swedish Chef, what have I told you about trying to reboot Silent Strawberry? Stop trying to do it! All jokes aside, it's funny to see the Swedish Chef once again used to make jokes about dark foreign films. Other than that, he's one of the characters interrogated in the interrogation song, he shows up to Constantine and Piggy's wedding in a black version of his chef hat. Pretty good Swedish Chef appearance, thank you. In the 2015 ABC Muppet sitcom, the Swedish Chef worked as the caterer for Miss Piggy's late night show. He appeared in most episodes of the series and had at least a couple of lines in most of his appearances. He's pretty consistently funny throughout, and episode 4 of the series gives us a scene where he does karaoke to Rapper's Delight, which is in the top 5 greatest things I've ever seen in my entire life.
I said the hip, hop, the hippie, the hippie, the hip, hip, hop, and you don't stop the rocket to the bang, bang, boogie, say up, up, the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat.
Another notable moment for Chef in this series comes from the finale, where he and Bunsen and Beaker team up to do a Swedish Chef Muppet Labs crossover sketch. In the Muppets Take the Bowl and Muppets Take the O2 live shows in 2017 and 2018, the Swedish Chef was given his own cooking sketch, with different guest stars based on where and when you saw the show. He also appeared in a pre-taped segment, a parody of The Walking Dead, called The Walking Bread. A baby version of the Swedish Chef, fittingly named Baby Chef, would appear in several episodes of the Muppet Babies reboot, starting with its second season in 2019. Voiced by Matt Danner, this version of Chef cleverly has shaggy hair covering his eyes instead of the bushy eyebrows of his older counterpart. From the clips of him I saw in the series, he also seems to speak a bit more clearly than his adult counterpart, with some more English words in there, probably done to help the young kids the show is aimed at understand him a little better. Before Baby Chef was introduced in Season 2, you could actually see a photograph of him on the wall in several Season 1 episodes of the Muppet Babies reboot. This design is pretty different from what we ended up getting when he physically appeared later on in the show, and it also seems to be pretty clearly based on this Swedish Chef stock photo. In the 2020 Disney Plus Muppet show Muppets Now, the Swedish Chef was given his very own segment called Okie Dokie Cookin', which appeared in 5 of the series' 6 episodes. In each of these sketches, the Swedish Chef would have a cook-off against a real celebrity chef. And while, like most of the sketches in Muppets Now, it's weirdly slow-paced, drags on for a bit too long, and unfortunately isn't as funny as it could be, it did at least give us a cook-off between the Swedish Chef and Danny Trejo.
Today we will be preparing the mole taco, traditional Latin meal, very, very delicious, probably better than anything in Sweden.
Currently, the Swedish Chef's most recent appearance was in the 2021 Disney Plus special Muppet's Haunted Mansion, where, like in many of the Muppet movies and specials, the Swedish Chef only appears for a little bit, only really having one notable gag. He appears as a ghost in the Haunted Mansion, offering Gonzo and Pepe drinks in cups that look like Angel Marie's head. He also appears outside of the mansion at the Muppets Halloween party, reusing his costume from The Walking Bread. The latest Muppet Show, 2023's The Muppets Mayhem, only featured the Electric Mayhem, alongside very brief cameos from Statler and Waldorf, and a couple of new Muppet characters. But the Swedish Chef is actually referenced in the series, as at the end of one episode, we could see lead human character Nora eating a bowl of Crunchy Stars cereal. This is a really funny reference to me. I absolutely freaked out when I first noticed it. One of the very few references to the other Muppets in this series. A few minutes ago, I mentioned that Muppet's Haunted Mansion was the latest appearance of the Swedish Chef, but that actually changed while I was in the middle of making this video. Just a few days ago, on May 16th, 2025, a Muppet-themed pre-show began airing as part of Disneyland's nightly show, World of Color. The show was made to celebrate Disneyland's 70th anniversary, which is going on this year, and also this year is the 70th anniversary of the Muppets, so they gave them their very own pre-show to open the whole show. The Swedish Chef appears as part of a musical montage of characters that don't speak clearly, as the Muppets are trying to find somebody to read off a list of safety instructions. I was pretty impressed by just how many jokes and characters they worked into this little pre-show. It's super fun, and I love that Disney's doing this as part of the Muppets anniversary and their anniversary. And with that, we've come to the end of the history of the Swedish Chef as of May 2025. The Swedish Chef isn't a character that's really changed all that much over the years. He has a formula that he's stuck to, and it's worked tremendously for 50 years now. Whenever the Swedish Chef pops up, you can guarantee he'll have a pretty funny line. It's kind of in just the principle of who the character is. He talks in this ridiculous, hilarious way, and is always doing insane stuff, so he basically guarantees a laugh. While he isn't always all that prominent, and many of his appearances simply give him one or two lines, you can tell that the Muppet writers and the Muppeteers always love including him whenever they can. His appearances never feel like cameos, they always feel like we're completely stopping the movie or the show to get the Swedish Chef in there and give him a few hilarious jokes. And that is, to me, what really sets the Swedish Chef apart from other characters. He's so well loved, they always make sure to go out of their way to include this guy, even if it's just in a very small role. We love you, Swedish Chef. The world loves you. Maybe one day, you'll be able to make a donut without shooting it. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching this episode of Muppet Deep Dive. As always, I've been your host, Ty. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite Swedish Chef appearance is. And also let me know what characters you'd like to see me cover in the future. I'm very excited to bring back the Muppet Deep Dive series. We'll be doing new episodes here every once in a while. I also want to give a huge shout out to my good friend and editor, Calypso the Poison Frog, for helping bring this video together while I go and get the finishing touches done on my Disney vlog. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, bork, bork, bork.